Hello! Today I'm gonna do another video, partly for my own recollection, partly for sharing with you, whoever watches these, about instrument making. I made 4 main instruments while here in the Bosque village in Michoacan, Mexico, and used a variety of things that I found lying around the property. So it's a lot of fun for me to experiment with making instruments because you start to figure out, why things sound the way they do. And really just what I've done is I think made the most of the instruments that I've made. Instead of trying to sort of strive through for perfection, I found ways to make the things that I've made sound as I want them to. I'm a saxophone player and a guitar player, I guess you could say, and so those have been kind of the wind instrument side of things, and the guitar stringed instrument side of things have been what I've explored. If you watched another video, you might have seen that I made this. Let's call it a guitar. Let's call it a lap guitar. Let's even call it maybe something close to a dulcimer, which is what inspired it. But this I call Picasso because it made me think of Picasso when I looked at it. In case I didn't run through much about it before, it's a 5-stringed instrument. It has regular guitar tuning knobs. It has, I'm not totally sure what these notes are. I would say it's in D, I believe. And so we have a D. Not sure if you can hear that, but a D. It doesn't really project sound that well because it doesn't have a sound box. But a D followed by an A, which is a 5th up. And then another A repeated. Part of the reason for that second A is because I had to fix the neck because it snapped on me. So this neck was actually wider at one point, and then it snapped right through here, so I had to reinstall these 2 tuning knobs, and I could no longer tune this 3rd string up to the note that I wanted because it actually broke the tuning knob. Too much pressure, so that's where I learned a little bit about sort of length to sound ratio. You can really tune a guitar to anything you want, but the low sounds will maybe the strings will be too loose, and the high sounds the strings will be too tight. And so this particular string was taking too much pressure, and it broke the gear. Actually is what broke on the back. So you probably can't see, but there are gears on the back, and one of the teeth, maybe you can see, one of the teeth right here is broken from tightening it too much. So I've compromised on a lower note. These next notes were then higher, but I lowered them so that it's really just a nice range for this instrument. We've got a D, an A, an A, and another D, and another A. So really just 2 notes on this instrument, but when you strum them together, you get a nice open fat sound that you can do lots of things with. So other things about this instrument, this is bone here, which was given to me by a person, couchsurfing host I stayed with in Sinaloa. Another piece of bone here, so that bridges the strings on either side. You can see that it's pretty flat, but this basically came from one big piece of oak that I used a chisel to make the shape that it currently is, and then I used a little bit of a planer, mostly really the chisel though, to get it flat enough and straight, and mostly my eye, honestly. I used a little bit of an existing lumber board to kind of true up and eye out things and trace out a line and cut and sort of follow that, but mostly just trust your eye. You can see what's level, you can kind of tell. So eventually it came through with sandpaper, and that made it flat enough that I could play. I have a mandolin that my brother gave me. He did this fabulous rework job, put it all back together. It's like a round back mandolin, and it looks beautiful, but the neck is a little bit warped, and so the frets kind of they don't allow you to play every position on the neck because basically you've got a situation where the fret is touching too high up when you're trying to have it touching down here. Anyway, you'll notice that there are no frets on this instrument, partly so you can play like fun, like little slide necks things like you would do on a stand-up bass guitar, or a contrabass or a double bass. What else is in this guitar? I used a system of pegs for the strings to attach those. You can see on the back there are holes where the strings get inserted. There's a couple of extra holes because I didn't know exactly where I needed to put these, and before I actually had a piece of turtle shell in here to bridge the string gap a little bit more, but it ended up working just with the oak. So the string comes right out of the hole, takes an angle, and then hits the bone, and then the pegs, which are also made out of oak and just shaved down with a pocket knife, they just get pounded in with a hammer and then they don't go anywhere. So this instrument needs retuning a lot more than a standard guitar, just because it's not it's probably still changing and expanding and contracting, and I still need to treat it with something. I've been treating some other instruments with just vegetable oil, because I guess you could use a different oil, but it's kind of fun to just treat it with whatever you got on hand. You can see the back of the guitar is very unfinished. I just haven't chosen to finish that yet. You can see the neck is a little bit bent, and also this is a fisheye camera, so it might look a little bit weird, but the neck is pretty thin, and it's holding up pretty well right now and for the last several weeks to all the pressure. The weird shape over here is, I don't know, really just a little bit following the shape of the wood and wanting this kind of protective box for the pegs. The shape changed a lot as I went on, because things would crack, and I was just like, I told my buddy I was just chasing cracks the whole time. So you can see the grain goes a little bit on an angle here, so I had to follow that. This I did drill out to run a cable kind of behind this little section, and this is for later installing a pickup. I had a pickup, it didn't work that well, so I'm not sure if it's something wrong with what I'm doing to wire it or what, but for now I've left it uninstalled. The last thing that's on here is this little volume knob and a 1/4-inch jack, and so that will all hook up with the pickup, so I can just plug it directly in. However, what's really cool about what I've found is the best way to amplify this instrument for now, it may not sound the nicest, but it definitely sounds pretty cool. I'll take my SM57 microphone, and before I was holding it right on this part of the guitar, and as soon as I did, you went from, which you can't hear much, to, which, this is just plugged into my little speaker here, but it really amplifies the sound. And what's happening is it's just picking up the vibration off of the wood. So I found a little place to sit this microphone, and now I can play with the microphone there. So that's pretty cool. I got a delay on too, you can hear. It's a little bit muddy, depends on how much I'm overplaying or turning the gain up too high on this little thing. So that's kind of distorted, but I kind of like distorted. I grew up playing punk rock, so that's cool. My friend Micah told me that I needed to get a microphone stand, and I don't have any access to a microphone stand, so I found a lovely little piece of pine. So that's a new addition to my setup here. That doesn't count as an instrument, but there you go, Micah. I have a mic stand now. Used to be a little bag and like set up in a really weird way on that, but this is fun. I might carry that with me in the future. I might not. So as you stick with me past the 9-minute mark here, I have a few more instruments to share. This is a bamboo flute. So a piece of bamboo that I found. Bamboo is completely hollow. You can't see all the way through it because there's a cork at the other end. Usually flutes want a sort of stopper so that you can control where the sound goes, and you blow into the blowhole. It can go both directions, back and down the tube, but you often want it to stop right at the blowhole, and from what I've read and what I've experimented with. So here's your blowhole, and then it came time to putting in finger holes. So I wanted to figure out, am I going to do a 6-hole flute or a 5-hole flute? These Native American style flutes all have those kinds of holes. Am I going to do more like a bansuri, which is an Indian style flute, which is more like this with 6 holes? One thing that I didn't read early on was about the size of the holes and how you can really tune the instrument to where you want it to be. But one thing I wanted to experiment with was a sort of sliding hole. So this one, I basically just opened up a hole here, and then the bamboo cracks really nicely and straight, and I just cracked it further and further, and I thought maybe I can put my fingers on the different parts of the hole and I can make different sounds. Now, because the hole was too big, it ended up that I really only had like this side to play with, so that might distort a little bit. Sorry about that. But then I was watching something online about a guy who was using a sleeve to find out where exactly to put holes on a flute. And so I said, well, why don't I just put the sleeve on and do that? But then I just started playing with it and thought, this is kind of fun to just have the sleeve stay on there. So it's just a piece of paper. I mean, I could upgrade this and do something different. But the sleeve now stays on right in the center, and I can put my 3 fingers up here and my 4 fingers down here, and I can play, like, for example, a little bit out of tune, but I'm just not doing a good job right now. But that's really cool. So because of the sliding scale, I can play like almost like a trombone, a sliding note. So I can go, sorry, excuse me. So that's really fun to play with. I can change the note, play around with it. What else? These black pieces of tape are just to patch up some cracks that we hear. I actually found that even the smallest of crack actually affects the ability of the sound to go through, and therefore for you to get the right note. And so that helped. There is a little crack on the back, but didn't find that it was not necessary to cover that one. So bamboo flute, piece of bamboo, no need to break the nodes because you just cut between the nodes. This is probably what 14 inches long, and a sliding note hole system. So that's been super fun. This has been kind of one of the things I spent a lot more time on. This is a piece of cherry that I made into a flute. You can see here that there are 3 holes, and there's a blowhole, and then a similar style of having the cork in the end. The cork goes right up to the blowhole again. I found that the big need to have that right there is that when you change registers, you play an octave up, some of the same holes don't play the same notes kind of thing if you don't have that spacing minimized. I think that has something to do with like the wavelengths and the overtone series. So if you don't know what the overtone series is, look it up. It's very interesting, the physics of music and why we hear what we hear. When you hear any note, you're also hearing a series of notes above. Starting with an octave, then a fifth, then a fourth, then a major third. I think is the next one. Maybe it's a minor third. But you can actually get all of those notes to come out by overblowing on certain wind instruments. So the saxophone, people do that all the time, and I'm going to show you that on my last instrument that I'm going to show you. So, the reason for 3 holes, why? Well, I was kind of interested in playing a hybrid of techniques to play different notes on this one. So the other hole that you will see on this instrument is on the back here. And that hole is often on instruments for playing up an octave or for just bringing a note into tune. And I'm just kind of, this is the first hole that I put in. And I just kind of said, okay, well, all right, I understand that. And then as I put in these other holes, I think this was the first hole that I put in. And I got, this very clear step from one note to another, and I was like, damn, that was either a really good shot or I don't know what. But I wasn't too afraid of doing it because I knew that from reading a bit that if you make this hole bigger, you can raise the pitch. So, you know, if you make your holes small to start, if you're ever making a flute, and then you can just raise the pitch. You don't have to worry about, you know, what is the exact mathematical, location of holes and size of holes. Although there are like these generators online where you can plug in all of your dimensions and everything. But, you know, I cut this freaking piece of cherry in half and then sand it out and everything. I mean, this took a long time, but I'm not sure if it's perfectly circular. I'm not sure what the exact diameter is. There's a lot of unknowns. And it was way more fun to improvise with finding out where the holes should be rather than trying to have this perfect formula, all the mathematics. This piece of paper on the bamboo flute actually is a piece of paper that I was using. I measured out the proportions on this flute and thought that I would just translate that and, you know, kind of adjust it down to size for another flute. But at the end, I just said, screw that. Just improvise something different. So, you know, basically with all the notes, all the holes covered, you get the lowest note the instrument can play, theoretically. So, pretty nice sound. I like the cherry a lot. I liked working with it. It's very fun. If you lift one hole, you're going to get the next note up. So I thought to myself, well, that's pretty cool. What if I put up one more hole, which is this hole, and what if I put it sort of like, you know, a roughly equal spacing away? You know, I'm thinking if I do it too far up, then I'm going to be screwed. But if I do it just a little bit up, somewhere that's comfortable for my fingers, I can always make it bigger if it's not in tune. Now, I lucked out. Maybe it's not exactly in tune, but it's pretty good. Now, when it came to playing the rest of the notes on this instrument, I wanted to be able to play a full scale. I thought, you know, I can either add the finger holes here, but then I was playing around and I found that if I put like a plunger in the end, if I put my finger in the end, I can actually go lower. And then if I play with two fingers on the end, I can also get a different note. So that's cool. It doesn't work that well in that register. But then when I get past a certain level, oh, and by the way, this is the third hole that I added, and I added a little bit, just a little bit higher, because I knew that, you know, a major scale is like whole, whole, half, right? Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, in terms of the distance between the notes. So I did that a smaller amount away, and that worked out well. And then the next note, I believe, is you actually lift up the thumb hole, and you have all fingers pressed down here. Nope, that's not it. The next one is actually, this is funny, two fingers on the end and covering this little mouth thing that happened to be here. So again, like, nobody's gonna play this on a similar. I mean, you'd have to. This is only a way to play this instrument. So that worked out such that two fingers here with all of this covered makes a nice, you know, if we're starting, I forget if it's D or A or where this starts, but it's basically the 5, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 6, 5. So that comes out cleanly, and then after that is. So that's, you know, all fingers down, including this, let's call it an octave hole, and then remove it, and you play an octave up. So we've got a whole scale plus some low notes. That's an octave. You can't go higher than that on this flute. That's because you don't have these notes. Usually flutes, like homemade flutes, you can get I think up to, you know, like let's say it's in C, you can get up to the second octave, up to G. You can't, or if it's in D, I don't know, something like that. But you can't get higher because you need something else to crack those higher registers, and more for another video. So, but anyway, that's cool. And then if you stick your thumb in, you can get an even lower note. Too much pressure for me to show that right now. So, but you can. And that's cool. I don't understand the physics of that. When you put your finger in, you're getting a much lower note. What's happening there such that you've shortened it, yet maybe it's because it's going double the distance or something like that. It's going back and forth. I don't know, but super fun to find a 3-hold flute with one on the back, and a little, you know, finger position here to be able to play a whole scale. Finally, I wanted to make a didgeridoo out of bamboo. This is the only non-natural material kind of thing that I made, but I just didn't have time for cutting the timber bamboo that's on the property and blowing out the nodes that are between all of you know, the 2-foot-long sections. There's 2 ways actually to do it. The other way is that you can cut the whole thing in half long ways, and then you can sort of carve the nodes out. I'd like to do that one day, but I didn't get a chance to. There was, however, this big piece of PVC pipe, which is about, I would say, 1.5 inches PVC. So I thought, all right, I'll just make it out of this. And at first I was playing without a mouthpiece, but then I thought, this is worthy of a mouthpiece. Let's make a mouthpiece. So I carved a mouthpiece out of oak. That's the mouthpiece. It's basically just a hole inside of a bigger chunk, and you know, I've sanded it so it's comfortable on the mouthpiece here. As far as playing it for you, maybe I could play it directly out there. Maybe you just hear it, but. So hopefully you heard that that sounds like a didgeridoo. And then, of course, I couldn't stop there, so I thought, how can we do a bass flute? Because I don't know if I've ever played one of those, but I would love to get some notes out of a really long, big chambered flute. So I cut a hole here as a mouth hole. I thought maybe I'll need to put a cork in the end here, but I'd like to keep it as a didgeridoo at the same time. And then I simply started playing around with playing it. Now, I'll play it into the microphone here. And that's pretty cool. So that's a pretty low note. Now, it's actually the first overtone. And so, as I mentioned, the overtone series, which is this sort of frequencies of resonance that happen over every note, I'm already popping the second one into the main note that you're hearing. So if you blow really slowly and softly, it's not coming out of the microphone too well, and I have never gotten it super clear, but you can actually get the low bass note. I'm not really that concerned with not getting that loud. I like the first overtone, and it means that the next overtone that I can get is the fifth above. And another one. And another one. So you could hear that boom, dum, dum, dum. And all of those are coming just from playing in the same hole, same length of tube, nothing else changes. So there is your sort of, you know, when the angle that the air is hitting the little slit where the blowhole is. That is sanded down, but you can't really see that necessarily. But this is a sharp angle, just like in a flute or a whistle. You would see a sharp angle that the airstream actually hits. By changing that angle and changing the velocity of your breath or your blowing, that's what pops out those other overtones. Now, what's cool is this is still open, so if I cover the hole, you can play a half step down. Not as clean. For whatever reason, it likes to echo out the end here. And then I couldn't stop there, so I did one more thing to the didgeridoo, which is to put in, I wanted to put a minor third up. So before, this didgeridoo was a little bit longer, and it played a note that was about a whole step down. And when I put in this hole, I just said, you know what? It looks like this hole on the flute was about 25% of the way down, and it would play a minor third. So here's that minor third. So I thought, that's cool. Why don't I try to do a similar hole here? So this is the first hole that was made. It's covered by a black piece of like sandpaper and tape to cover the hole when I don't want to be using it. And if I cover it and uncover it with my thumb, here we have. That, as you can hear, is actually only a whole step, not a minor third, which would be a whole step plus a half step. So that's because the didgeridoo used to be longer. So that hole worked when the didgeridoo was longer, but then I wanted to tune all of my instruments into roughly the same notes. And so I kind of mostly went off the cherry flute and where I liked playing most. Found, an embouchure that plays roughly in tune with like my flute, my regular flute traversiale. I don't know the name in English, I only know in French. But all these notes had to come into one, and this one was like a step low, and it was stupid. So I cut the end to bring the tone up. Shorter means higher. And then I found that I needed a different hole. So this is my different hole. And that different hole, as you can see, is like a little bit of a funky shape because where I first decided to put it, it wasn't quite high enough. Sorry for the echo here, but it helps you hear cool sounds. So I made the hole a little bit bigger to bring the pitch up a little bit, and now I've got pretty well a minor third. So if you listen here, that's the minor third. So if I don't want either of these notes, I simply just slip this sleeve over them, and I don't have to hold there. So that's cool. You can also hit the end to make a sound. I'm not a drummer, so I'm not going to play around with that too much. And then, of course, I showed you that it's a didgeridoo. So didgeridoo, that's the last instrument that I've made here, and that's it for my instruments. Thanks for watching this long video if you watched it all, and I'm going to play some more tunes with just these instruments today, so look out for those videos. Thanks!